So this is just about 20 minutes to 9 local time in London, in the UK, within quotation marks. 20 minutes to 9 in the morning of Thursday, the 8th of July, 2021. So 8:40 hours GMT, London, within quotes UK, in the morning of Thursday, the 8th of July 2021. So how many papers have we got here? We got the Guardian. We got the Guardian there. And we've got the Daily Mirror. And we got the Daily Mail going over the top. The I newspaper, the Daily Scar, Daily Scum, and the Financial Crimes. These are the words and names and titles that we had inserted, replacing the official titles or names. This is the Times. And this is the toxic Beaverbrook legacy of lies and racism and stupidity and corruption and dishonesty. Although the Beaverbrook legacy is not circulated as widely as the Daily Mail that appeased Hitler and the Nazis in the 1930s, the Daily Beaverbrook is as bad, as corrupt, as poisonous as the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is substantially more corrupt because of the extent and the intensity and the depth of its contents as compared with Dirty Digger Rupert Murdoch's The Scum. He says, can you believe it? And the pictures that the racists are running of footballers in the team that played against Denmark yesterday, the pictures don't include any of the black image or black footballer. So that is something that is obvious. We're just checking again. No, they haven't. And the Times is no exception. And in the back page of the Times either, there is nothing. It's the Southgate. And the Fleet Street, and in the cover of the coverage or cover-ups of the events as depicted on pages 2 and 3 of the Times, there is no identifiable picture of the crowd that has got any person from the African or Asian background. And the first they recognize any African or black footballer is on page 5 with Raheem Sterling. Raheem Sterling is shown as standing on his own, not as part of the group, any group. Now, the contradictions between the ending of the restrictions by Johnson and the factual inclusion of references to the alarm felt by scientists is there, but they're not showing the alarm in any way that dominates their attention. There is a late realization by Jacob Zuma that he probably would get a concessionary deal if he made a gesture and handed himself in to start prison centers. Jacob Zuma, the former South African president, is beginning a jail sentence for contempt of court after turning himself in to the authorities last night. And Zuma's contempt of court actually relates to the substantial or substantive claims against him about corruption. But the African National Congress is still backing him, which is reminiscent of the African National Congress being a corrupt outfit throughout its entire history, even during the years of Nelson Mandela being its nominal head while he was in prison, serving the sentences on him imposed by the racist apartheid regime. Now, there is nothing in the Times. The editorials are empty and misleading and stupid. And the letters are not published to reflect what is going on in this country or in the world. It's a status quo, and it's a narrative that suits the Boris Johnson regime. And the Guardian on the front page, obviously, the whole of the front page is given to the football win against Denmark yesterday. There is a token piece at the very bottom where it's saying that scientists are alarmed over end to lockdown. And the first paragraph says, lifting the remaining COVID restrictions in England this month is dangerous and premature. According to international scientists and doctors who have called on the UK government to pause reopening until more people are vaccinated. Writing in the Lancet, more than 100 global experts warn that removing restrictions on 19th of July will drive millions of infections and risk creating a generation with chronic health problems and disability from long COVID, the impact of which may be felt for decades. Government scientists expect cases of COVID to soar into the summer months, even without the further easing of restrictions that is scheduled for 19th of July. The UK yesterday reported more than 30,000 new cases for the first time since January, and more than 40% rises in hospitalizations and deaths. Whitehall sources have said any further delay or U-turn is not on the cards, but they expect to come under increasing pressure on the coming days to change course. So 19th, which is 11 days from today. And the Guardian's photographs of the response to England in the crowds is very much similar. And it looks like several of these photographs have been published by Fleet Street papers, which have received these pictures from news agencies or picture agencies, because they are the same. And about the virus, on page 6 of The Guardian, the heading is "Vulnerable People Need Reassurance Amid Rise in Cases," say campaigners. So the pictures really re-emphasize the lunacy of the crowd, popular crowds. It's completely rational. And there are continuing contradictory news items, news headlines in the Guardian. And there is a piece under the title "Sketch" by Zoe Williams. It's not John Crace. So what happened to John Crace? Is he on holiday or has he left the Guardian? So Zoe Williams is writing the sketch, which is supposed to be the political sketch based on parliament and government. And the headline is, or the heading is, "Johnson takes his talent for irrelevance to the point of senselessness." Well, this is a completely senseless and irrelevant heading as well. It's not Johnson's talent for irrelevance. It's Johnson's talent for lying, craft and selfishness, and narcissistic greed. And this is a piece about China's treatment, the genocide, massacre, and rape of the Uyghur Muslims. But the heading doesn't refer to the Muslims, thus proving again the Guardian's own anti-Muslim agenda, narrative, and history. It looks for excuses and pretexts to deny the identity of the Muslims who are in detention, massacre, genocide, attacks, targets of the Chinese genocide, mass rapes, torture and brutality and massacres. So let's see the first paragraph written by the diplomatic editor, the racist Patrick Winter. Winter is the brother of Anna Winter, the woman who is also known as the devil. In the book, The Devil Wears Prada. Britain must act to stop China's atrocities against Uyghur Muslims by banning the import of Chinese cotton and solar panels from Xinjiang province, as well as by announcing that no government officials will attend the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022. A report by MPs says. The chairman of the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said that without action, the UK would be allowing China to nest the dragon deeper and deeper into British life. The committee's report says the government's often tough rhetoric over the industrial scale forced labor schemes in Xinjiang is not matched by effective action. The MPs accuse ministers of setting lax requirements on companies to remove forced labor from supply chains. So we shall look at the actual report and see what it actually says. The Chinese government is responsible for the mass detention of more than 1 million Uyghurs, for forcing them into industrial-scale forced labor programs, and for attempting to wipe out Uyghur and Islamic culture in the region through forced sterilization of women, destruction of cultural sites, and separation of children from families. The mass incarcerations and connected factories and farms mean it should be assumed that any product originating from Xinjiang is the product of forced labor. While much focus has been placed on the textile and apparel sector, other areas such as solar energy agriculture, and electronics also bear a substantial risk of using forced labor. It says as many as 570,000 people are forced to pick cotton, often paid little to nothing. As a remedy, it proposes that until there can be definitive proof that products are not tainted by forced labor, UK companies and consumers should not be purchasing them. It also calls for a government import ban on cotton and other products sourced to forced labor, something Tugendhat said was in compliance with the World Trade Organization rules. More than 80% of China's cotton comes from Xinjiang. China provides a quarter of the world's products. Similarly, 40% of UK solar panels have Xinjiang-sourced materials. And it goes on. Now this piece is, the display is smaller on this same page, page 16, than the item about the mother of the sisters killed in Park. The sisters Biba Henry, 27, left, and Nicole Smallman, 46, in the park in London before their murder. This whole piece about the two sisters is about the legal system in this country and the fact that families of victims like this have to raise concerns and talk about the impact on other people's safety that this murderer would have. Shows that a dysfunctioning system. The system is dysfunctional. And it says that the killer of these two sisters, Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman, had been through a government de-radicalization program, but was said to have drawn up a contract in his own blood with a demon to sacrifice women in return for winning the lottery. How do you deal with that? And what are the measures in place to protect people from someone like that? The social services obviously don't have, there is no reference to what the social services did or what the so-called de-radicalization program did to de-radicalize him. So there is a void in the report, in the coverage. And while people are that seriously under threat, there is nothing in the Fleet Street papers about the danger and the risk and the threat to the safety and security of the ordinary members of the public. It's a kind of radical fanaticism driven by football fanatical that the majority of the many and the gullibles are being kind of controlled and manipulated and kind of triggered. So these papers, the Fleet Street papers, are not behaving as responsible organs for spreading responsible ideas and information and channeling a sense of response among the public, both directly as those who read and subsidize them, and indirectly by third party kind of influence. Shall be talking more about the legal system and the social disservice under the control of the local councils in England. We shall talk more about that. Earlier we tweeted about the criminality that has been added to the role of the local councils by the imposition of the elected mayor post. And we have done that in the context of the bill, that is the democracy bill, which has been introduced or tabled in the UK House of Commons on Wednesday, yesterday, the 7th of July. And this is a piece that is supposed to be addressing inadequacies prevalent in the current democracy regimes. And one of the things that this bill is proposing is for electors in this country to have to carry photo identities. In a comment written by probably a Russian or Polish woman journalist in The Spectator, which is far right and racist, there is a reference to Tower Hamlets Council about the corrupt mayor. The corrupt mayor Lutheraman. Now, we have said that despite the pretense that the conservatives in Tower Hamlets, the Conservative councillor called Peter Goulds, is against corruption, electoral corruption. Goulds himself is corrupt. And we apply that, extrapolate that to the behavior and the role and the record of the so-called Labour Party, which is numerically the majority party on Tower Hamlets Council, and to which the current incumbent, John Biggs, belongs. Now, John Biggs was praised by Richard Morey, which is a point we also make. John Biggs, the current incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor in Tower Hamlets Council, was actually praised by Richard Morey in his published ruling dated the 23rd of April 2015, the ruling which included the order that Lutheraman be struck out of the post of elected mayor and be banned from seeking public election for 5 years. Now, in the period since that date, in the period since that hour, actually, the hour when Richard Morey published his ruling against Lutheraman on the 23rd of April 2015, our campaign and I have been clear that Morey's ruling was correct in law. But our comment about some of the contents, some of the explanatory contents in Richard Morey's published ruling includes the fact that Morey was biased in his opinion. There's a crucial difference there. We said that legally he was correct to order the end of Lutheraman's career there and also to declare invalid the election held on the 22nd of May 2014. So there are two things. One is that we are saying that his decision was correct legally, and the other we are saying that some of the opinion contained in that ruling, they are wrong and they're racist. We say that because Morey appears to have been influenced by quite a few stereotypes. And one of the things that Morey has been quite openly wrong about is his support for John Biggs. Because while he referred to published and publicly accessible and publicly named kind of comments and sources of comments about John Biggs, Richard Morey doesn't make any reference to the records and the role and the accessible role played by John Biggs as a racist during his career so far, and his career up to the date of that ruling, 23rd of April 2015. Because Mori didn't explain why he didn't take the approach of looking at John Biggs in the context of Biggs's obligation to have had a record opposing racism. So we shall come more on John Biggs and Richard Mori's praise of John Biggs. But going back to the Spectator and the piece that this woman has written about the need for photo identity, Richard Mori's examination of the evidence as part of the application or petition against Luther Roman did not actually concern the identity of voters or the verifiability of voters presenting themselves at the polling booth claiming to be who they were. The petition that Richard Mori examined against Luther Roman was about not the identity of voters, but about the influencing of the voters. Think about the difference. Influence is literally the word, because one of the things that Mori spent considerable amount of time and gave considerable space to in his ruling of the 23rd of April 2015 is about the influence of the voters, not the identity of the voters, but influence of the voters. Two very different and distinct concepts and phenomena. Nobody has examined the Richard Mori ruling apart from ourselves. Anyone who claims that they have done have to produce contemporaneous actual evidence of having done that. They haven't. They have stolen our analysis or contents of our analysis, and only tokenistically, because they have not really been engaged in opposing corruption in the council, let alone in opposing the corrupt post of elected mayor in Hrs council. So the voter identity, the photo identity, is a separate matter, not one that Richard Mori actually was asked to consider by the petitioners. That's number one. Number two is, this is an updater commentary, diagnostic commentary. The named persons who did petition the election commissioner against Luther Roman have remained, and I repeat, remained absolutely silent on corruption in Hrs council. Now, what is the silence an explanation of? The silence is an explanation of the truth about the actual role and the attitude and the behavior and the interest of those who signed the petition against Luther Roman. There were four. And that was a signature, signed the petition in June 2014. So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's 7 calendar years now. Just over 7 calendar years since they signed that petition and submitted the petition. And apart from their appearance or their representation according to the procedure before the election commissioner, those named petitioners have remained publicly, at least, inactive and silent about corruption in Tower Hamlets Council, corruption by the elected mayor, corruption in the electoral system or electoral kind of records of Tower Hamlets Council. Think about that. You have to follow this, whoever you are, and remember what we are saying. This is a world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And Fleet Street, we include, by Fleet Street, things like the Spectator. The Spectator is the right wing. It's more right wing now than it was in the past. The Spectator is the right wing weekly print publication and an outlet that openly supports the Conservative Party and the racists. And the board of the Spectator is currently chaired by Andrew Brilopad-Neil. Now, Andrew Brilopad-Neil is the man who is the kind of force behind the newly launched GB News. And Brilopad-Neil is a Brexiteer. Brilopad-Neil is a racist. Brilopad-Neil is a right-winger in the universally, conventionally understood sense of the phrase right-winger and a racist. So the piece by this woman is with the Eastern European name. Her first name is Mary, the second name is Eastern European name. But she has had bylines for decades, or at least quite a long number of years in the UK Fleet Street. Now, her piece that is dated yesterday, online piece, refers to Tower Hamlets and Richard Morey's ruling. But the piece is about headed by photo ID being the main center of that heading. So I go back again in order to re-emphasize what I said earlier in this edition, that the democracy bill that she is talking about does not deal with the problems of corruption, criminality of the elected mayor system, nor does it deal with the many overdue issues that should have been dealt with by the supposed opponents of the corrupt mayor Lutfur Rahman. So I go back to the question that although the Spectator piece by this woman with the Eastern European name is saying that the photo identity is actually relates to why photo identity is needed, and that the call for photo identity for voters is supposedly stated to be based on evidence of what happened in Tower Hamlets, and that evidence is summarized in one paragraph by referring to Lutfur Rahman and by referring to Richard Morey. And again, I said that although that is the statement, it is not the correct statement, because Richard Morey was not asked by the petitioners to talk about the identity of the electors who were supporting Lutheraman. The petition was about the influence, how whoever kind of worked to influence the voters to vote for Lutheraman, how that influence was exerted and asserted and practiced. We have said earlier, not today, but in the past, commentary and examination, that one of the witnesses that Lutheraman's kind of defense against the petition produced before Richard Morey, sitting as the election commissioner, not sitting as a High Court judge, which is a completely additional corruption by Fleet Street and other morons. He may have a status equivalent to a High Court judge, whatever tier, but he didn't sit there hearing the petition as a High Court judge. He heard the petition as the election commissioner, not as a High Court judge. So the decision should not be summarized or stated as being a decision by the High Court judge. So therefore, what we have got on the records in Fleet Street, and in this instance we're talking about the Spectator magazine, which is part of the peripheral neighboring kind of environment of the Fleet Street media. And they have got these things wrong about Richard Morey. They've got it wrong about Richard Morey, and they've got it wrong about the integrity of the elections and the honesty and purity of democracy and integrity of the electors, and of the electoral process. Richard Morey's report is about more than 100 pages long, 100 A4 pages long. And Morey spends that space mostly repeatedly referring to the various aspects of the Representation of the People Act 1983. And Morey doesn't give any similar, comparable space or time or attention to the composition of the population, the demography, the electorates, the electors, and the history of elections in Tower Hamlets. This is world exclusive comment, an assertion by me. Nobody else has made this. So this is part of the continuing comprehensive examination of Richard Morey's own ruling. As I said, I still maintain that his legal basis was correct. But the fact that he didn't discuss the history of elections in Tower Hamlets, and he did not examine racism in Tower Hamlets, He did not examine racism in British politics. He did not examine the racism in the electoral system. These are serious failings by Richard Morey. Nobody else is saying it. Not Luther Rahman, not his advisors, not the East London Mosque, and most certainly not the Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques, where one of his key witnesses, influencers, Maulana Shamsul Haque, is very actively involved. Why am I referring to Maulana Shamsul Haque? Although the spelling may be similar to my surname, he is not a relation of mine. And Shamsul Haque was mentioned by the side defending Luther Rahman against the petitioners. And it was alleged against Shamsul Haque by the petitioner side that Shamsul Haque had been one of the main, if not the main, influencers of the electors for Luther Rahman at the 2014 mayoral so-called election. It was alleged by the petitioners that Shamsul Haque had actually played a part as a central influencer by openly asking Muslim worshippers or prayer goers to treat the election at that time forthcoming election of the mayor system or the mayor post as one in which they should cast their votes in accordance with the duties in the Sharia, that they had a duty to vote for Luther Rahman because he was a Muslim. When this was claimed by the petitioner side before Richard Morey, sitting as election commissioner, Shamsul Haque at first denied having said any such thing. So in due course it was pointed out to him that there had existed a recording of Shamsul Haque saying exactly that. Hearing that, Shamsul Haque's reply was words to the effect that, well, if there is a recording, or if there is recording, or if there are recordings of my having said words to that effect, then I must have said what is being recorded or being stated as having been my advice, urging to the potential electors, voters, to vote for Luther Rahman because it was part of the religious duty to vote for him. Words to that effect, I'm saying. Now, Shamsul Haque has been a very regular feature of the events that take place in the building complex called the East London Muslim Centre, or the London Muslim Centre rather. That's a complex of buildings that includes the East London Mosque, the London Muslim Centre, and the operations carried out from that complex, quite apart from the actual ceremonial religious congregations and prayers congregations, that include the Islamic Forum of Europe or Islamic Forum in Europe, and the, of course, London Muslim Centre. Now, neither the Islamic Forum in Europe or Islamic Forum of Europe, nor the London Muslim Centre, is, objectively speaking, accountable to the ordinary Muslims, either in the borough of Tower Hamlets or in the wider area of East London. These are secretive, undemocratic, unaccountable entities and organizations. So it is all the more extraordinary that Lutfur Rahman was sponsored by and supported by anyone involved with those people, because it goes against the objective spirit of democracy, openness, and society, and accountability. So when Maulana Shamsul Haq was exposed as having been a liar about the influence, religious influence, spiritual influence that he asserted on behalf of Lutfur Rahman, it contravened one of the provisions contained in the 1983 Representation of the People Act, which Richard Morey elaborated on and repeatedly kept referring to in his ruling. So Richard Morey appeared to be complying with the actual Act of Parliament, and he elaborately, extensively identified Maulana Shamsul Haq's wrongdoing and breaching the 1983 Act, and so on. He listed a number of other breaches. And in the course of doing that, Richard Morey praised John Biggs. Not only did he praise John Biggs, but Richard Morey, and this is another exclusive original diagnosis by me and the Khoodeelaar campaign of the Morey ruling. Nobody else has done this. And what Morey did by praising John Biggs was to that extent neutralize his own neutral position. And it took the side of John Biggs. Morey did not cite any admissible evidence showing that John Biggs' record contained any incident or event where Biggs was actively engaged in opposing racism. In the absence of that, Morey's praise of John Biggs came across as Morey saying that because John Biggs is who he is, it is inconceivable that he would be a racist. So Morey abused his position. And I'm saying this exclusively. Nobody else has said that. If they have said that, I want them to show me contemporaneous evidence. I have been spending the last 6 calendar years extensively studying Richard Morey's ruling very regularly. So the Morey abused his position by praising John Biggs and certifying John Biggs as being somebody who would not, in his opinion, be a racist. So it was Maury's opinion about John Biggs, not the evidence that Maury saw about John Biggs opposing racism. Because if Maury had actually looked for evidence of John Biggs's conduct about racism, Maury would find that John Biggs had been racist on the records. So to exonerate John Biggs of being a racist by actually leaving out evidence of John Biggs's conduct, Maury was actually behaving with prejudice and abusing his position. And he was breaking the duty to be objective and neutral and be entirely led by evidence. Now, the Evening Standard, in their first report after Maury's ruling against Luthvoroman on the 23rd of April 2015, the Evening Standard itself, or the writer itself, or the piece itself, got emotionally involved as a vehicle for John Biggs. Biggs is known as a racist. It's not something that I'm saying. Biggs has been known to be a racist for decades, known to other people, known by other people who have had more than one fleeting, regular contacts with him, or who observed him from closer proximity over a number of years than would appear from a general statement about him. So, whether Richard Maury's wrongdoing and abuse of his position constituted a kind of challengeable ground to seek to overturn his ruling has not been explored to this date by anyone. So what we are saying, what I'm saying, is that Maury, for wider democratic jurisprudential reasons, needs to be asked to explain why he said the things in favor of John Biggs about racism that he did say. And we shall be following this up, this commentary up, by sending Maury a series of questions about this very thing. So it was not about the identity of the voters, but it was the influence on the voters that Maury actually focused on. So the photo identity issue that the Spectator article is talking about is not relevant in the way that the writer in the Spectator or the Spectator online writer is saying. So her name is Mary Dijevsky. Now, this is a reference to Mary Deveskid as being involved in the Independent. Whether she is still involved in the Independent is another matter. So we shall be talking about Richard Morey and the issue of the Democracy Bill and the need for photo identity and the other things in the later parts.